Alright, so I'm back, and today, as promised a couple weeks back, but my computer died, we're going to talk about Moon Knight. So, what I wanted to do is just kind of go through a bunch of the Moon Knight comics that I have. And the easiest way to do that, to get you a good gist of the character, is to do the essentials. We'll do the first three essentials and then we'll kind of go from there. Seeing if anybody's actually even watching it and interested in it or not. But the reason, like the catalyst for this is, I've heard that there's supposed to be a Moon Knight movie in the works, or Moon Knight TV show or cameo or what have you since, before even Iron Man was a thing. He was teased in the old Blade TV show. He's mentioned by name. Or Mark Specter is. So it's like it's been on the works, and everybody just kind of puts it off, and they put it off, and they put it off, and then I hear so many different actors and characters saying, "Hey, I want to do Moon Knight. I want to do Moon Knight." Directors. All of this stuff, and yet we still haven't got a Moon Knight movie or TV show. And then the rumor is that they had him written in for Iron Fist season 2, and he got cut. So, it's like he's just always on that verge. So I wanted to go through this because maybe I don't know. It just kind of. It's been on my mind lately. So this is Essential Moon Knight, Volume 1. So this collects all of his early appearances, because he didn't have his own comic book from the start. I will go into more of that as we look into it. And then it does include the first 10 issues of his series when he finally did get one. So we're not going to read like the whole book or anything like that. We're just gonna kind of skim through some of the appearances and why I think they're important. And this is the start. This is the first time we ever see Moon Knight. It's Werewolf by Night number 32. One of the few comics I'm missing of my Moon Knight collection. So he starts out as a villain to the werewolf. He comes in and he's beating him up. It kind of comes in mid-story, and then it kind of goes into a flashback. But you can see, I don't know how well you can tell, but his costume is completely different than it is back in, or it is currently. I'm trying to see if there's some artwork back here. Not really. Not what I was looking for anyway. But see, he's got more of a black and silver suit with silver gauntlets. And there's his truncheon. And then his cape is more like glider wings that's attached from the wrist to the belt. So like right here, outside of the fact that he's, a guy that talks about, or he's the Moon Knight, and he's got the crescent moon, there's really not, you can't really compare him all that much to Batman. I don't think the look is anywhere near the same. And at this point, crescent moon on the chest, you can't say that that's taken for Batman, because it's like, well, Superman has it, Batman has it, Green Lantern has it, Spider-Man has it, Captain America has it. Everyone has their little symbol of who they are on their chest. So anyway, like I said in my kind of introductory video a couple weeks ago, we'll be talking about the Batman thing, because I don't see the comparison. So here he is, he's fighting a werewolf. Now, because he's coated in silver, he's really beaten down on the werewolf. It's not a whole lot of difficulty for him to take him, because he's a much more skilled fighter. Going back to this page. So he's talking about certain kicks and punches that are performed to perfection. and it's with a silver boot, so it really hurts the werewolf. So this continues on for a while. You later read that the committee, who is a villain to the werewolf, I guess. I never read Werewolf by Night, so I can't really talk too much. Like if how long he's been fighting them. But they hired Moon Knight, and they gave him the costume too. So this comes into a little bit of a strange retcon later on. But so yeah, Moon Knight is a henchman for the committee. They hire him. He goes in. He fights the werewolf. He defeats the werewolf, and he brings the captured werewolf to the committee. You can see down here. Eventually, he decides that he's going to double cross the committee because they don't like what they're up to completely. Lets the werewolf out and lets the werewolf like completely dismantle what's left of the committee. And then you find out that Moon Knight steals all their money too. So it's like he's a really shady guy in his first 2 comic book appearances. Now, from this point on, he has smaller appearances. This is a Marvel Spotlight on Moon Knight. So he's off doing his own thing. Again, his costume's completely different than it is later on. He wears it this way because it helps him glide. So when he's jumping, he can just hold his arms out and he can glide. So this is where he comes up with one of his first villains, the Conqueror Lord. And if you know Moon Knight as well as I do, it's like, oh hey, you're a villain for Moon Knight. I'm sorry, because you're not gonna make it. And you also start seeing where he's got his other personalities start showing up. Like here, he's going into Jake Lockley mode, so he's just totally into the persona of a cab driver. So yeah, he just completely changes his personality for it. It's not, these earlier stories they're kind of there. They're entertaining, but they don't go into too much of his detail. And it doesn't really explain all too much yet on why he just decided that he's going to become a superhero. It will later. So yeah, he's just trying to be a good guy. But so far, all we know about him is that he's just kind of this shady guy that just went after the werewolf because somebody paid him to, and then he stole the costume that they gave him. So then he goes up, gets Spider-Man. Which is fun. He comes up with Spider-Man and they team up. So they're going up against Cyclone. I haven't read this comic in a long time, but it's just more like introduction to the character. Spider-Man realizes Moon Knight. They start fighting, but Spider-Man realizes, oh hey, you're not actually a bad guy, are you? And then they team up and they do the thing. It's really nothing too spectacular. Then we get to the Thing and Moon Knight. So for a while there, Thing was super popular back in the late 70s and early 80s. He was like the most popular character from the Fantastic Four, from what I understand. And so they did this Marvel 2-in-1, and it was always like the Thing and they just kind of transplant other heroes. So this one, it's Moon Knight. So they just kind of team up. They do some sleuthing together, so to speak, fighting bad guys. Nothing overly ambitious here. Thing doesn't fully trust Moon Knight, but they work together. And then he gets, I don't know if you want to call it promotion or demotion or what, but back around that same time, Hulk had a magazine. It wasn't a comic book, it was a magazine. And, Hulk would do all of his stuff. But then Moon Knight was given the last few pages of the magazine. So he was just kind of cast into the back. Which now he's kind of entered into almost like a monthly kind of comic book strip. So we just got to go into some of his adventures. Again, he still has the same costume where the wings are attached to his arms. So, there's some things going on. Nothing too out of the ordinary, like crazy. None of it's like super crazy adventures, just kind of him going through things. So, now has he changed his costume? No, he hasn't changed his costume yet. I think he's fighting Lupin in this one. If I remember correctly. Let's see here. Just gonna keep going. Scrolling through. I mean, it's nothing too, like I keep saying, it's nothing too spectacular. But it's all like just so far one kind of story. Yeah, it's Lupin. It's a pseudo villain, Lupineer, the wolf. He just can't escape things like that. So it looks like he has changed his costume. He decided, I didn't see the page, but he decided to change it up because this allows more mobility in his when he's fighting, because having the cape attached to his arm kind of limits his restrictions. Now the downside to that is that when he glides, he has to hold the cape to glide, as opposed to just jumping and gliding. So yeah, he fights off Lupineer. Throughout the comics so far, you find out that he is a master fighter. He's pretty much knows almost all the martial arts there are, more on the military side of things as opposed to like ninja side, like Batman. So he's a very competent fighter. And then so you can see like the guy falls and stabs himself. Like Moon Knight doesn't always necessarily kill his enemies; they just seem to die. And then he just kind of keeps going, hanging out with Hulk, or in the back of the Hulk magazine. Also, another thing that we've realized to this point is that Moon Knight does have super strength. Now, at this point, it's not because of Khonshu, the Egyptian god. That whole aspect of him doesn't come in until later in the series. He's actually part werewolf. He was bitten by the werewolf in his first appearances, and that gives him super strength and agility and all that. So in this, I believe this issue, he's concerned because the more full the moon is, the stronger he is. So the lower the moon is, the weaker he gets. So he doesn't know if he's going to be able to fight anybody when there's a no moon. So you can see his powers are draining. It's kind of an interesting aspect of the character. But at the same time, it's something that didn't stick with, and I'm glad that didn't stick with it, because that'd be kind of lame to be like, oh yeah, I'm a superhero, but if the moon's not right, I'm weak. Like everyone's got to have their own kryptonite. So yeah, we get to see some Hulk, and then there's a good scene here. So this is during the no moon. This is why I think Moon Knight is powerful. So is a very powerful superhero and underrated. So here's a no moon. This is where Moon Knight is at his absolute weakest, and here's the Hulk, and the Hulk is the Hulk. So Moon Knight accidentally sneaks up on the Hulk, and Hulk backhands him, and he survives. So it's like, Moon Knight can take a hit from Hulk when he's at his weakest and still survive. So I think that's a good thing. Now we get into his first true, his actual first true villain. This is Hatchet Man. And so it's kind of like a murder mystery that we start off with. Somebody's killing all of these nurses in New York, and so Moon Knight decides he needs to stop him. So he's going after him, and he finds out that it's his brother Randall. So this is the first time we come across Randall Specter. He's a very important character for the series, and you can see it, like he's just killing a bunch of people. And then Marlene, Moon Knight's girlfriend, decides that she's going to try and be a nurse to get Hatchet Man out so the Moon Knight can fight him, which of course doesn't go so well for her. She gets injured, but they end up dueling it out, and as they tend to do. And as you can see, he throws Randall into this stick, and then he gets impaled. So Hatchet Man is now dead. So the thing is like, Hatchet Man is dead, and he comes back. So we'll get into how he is able to come back later, but it gets really convoluted, but it's also his return villain is his brother. So, very, very typical comic booky stuff. We get some more adventures of him. I'm trying to, I have no idea what these are. which, because it's so short, you can see it's like 5 pages long. So that's one of those issues with being stuck inside the Hulk magazine. It's you get that. Everybody else is getting a full comic. He's getting nothing but that. And here's a Marvel preview where he's going up against this guy that has like a mental control device. So again, nothing too out of the norm for him at this point. Just kind of a mystery thing. He's got to find the bad guy. Nothing too memorable. For me, a lot of this from Werewolf by Night until here, outside of Randall Specter, this is almost just filler. You get a little bit of his background, but not a whole lot. So it's like almost more than half of this book is like a filler. You just kind of get a feel for who he is as a superhero at this point, as opposed to really knowing who he is and knowing his villains. I mean, most of the villains that he's come across thus far has died, so it's he's not getting that big of a rogues gallery, because how can you have a rogues gallery when there's nobody left? So this is Moon Knight number 1. This is where we start really seeing the different identities, really focusing on Moon Knight. Obviously now, because it's his own comic. So this is 1980 was when this one was published. Now, the Werewolf by Night was, let's see here, I can't remember when Werewolf by Night came out, but it was years gone by. Yeah, I don't know. Usually it's on the front of the comic, but anyway, not important. So he finally gets his own comic, and we start off in issue 1 where where Mark Specter is in the desert. Now this is telling the story of how Moon Knight was a mercenary, working with Raoul Bushman, and his buddy Frenchie. Frenchie is his helicopter pilot. He's been through a lot of these, but just mostly to just drop him off. He also meets Marlene, Marlene's dad, who gets killed by Bushman. Mark decides, hey, we're going too far. Bushman shoots him and leaves him for dead in the desert. So then these priests find Moon Knight, or Mark, drag him into the temple. He dies at the foot of the Khonshu statue. And then Khonshu resurrects him so that he can go fight. And then he takes this cloak, and then now he's Moon Knight. You know, not full costume Moon Knight, but now he wants his vengeance against Bushman, and they have his first true villain as Bushman. And then he goes back to New York and creates different identities. This is going into everything. The moon copter has now been changed design, so it's more like a moon blade. I could definitely see the similarities with Batman there. I could see where people are talking about. But it's not necessarily Batman. It's Moon Knight. If you're following it, you if you read all this, you would know more that it's not necessarily a Batman knockoff. So he comes across Bushman again, and they get into their big fight. And he defeats him. Of course he does. But Bushman is still very much alive. Let's see here. The Slasher. Classic. So he comes across another villain. So now he's just kind of striking out on his own now. He's not in other people's comics. He's not waiting for, hoping that, the publisher's like, oh yeah, let's throw Moon Knight in here. He's got his own comic. They're trying to establish his own character. You meet other characters, side supporting characters like Crowley here, who gets attacked by the Slasher. And because of that, they're like, oh, no, we gotta stop him. So, yeah, I don't know if I'm doing a very good job here, but I don't care. I'm having fun. So, yeah, nothing too out of the norm. He defeats the Slasher, and that's the end. So, does he kill him? Yeah, he falls off a building. And it turns out it was like Crawley's son or something. I don't know. Alright. So Midnight means murder. This is where he first comes across Midnight. Who's just... He's a cat burglar who dresses all black and only hits right at midnight. So he's going after him. Again, nothing too spectacular, but Midnight is a returning villain in a way, so it's definitely somebody that is of importance, severe importance later on, in the much, much later comics. Let's see here. And yeah, so again, he tries to get away, but Moon Knight stops him, but it doesn't stop him completely, and he falls into the river and seemingly drowns. Let's see here. And now we see that the leftover of the committee that the werewolf didn't kill decide that they want Moon Knight's blood. They are going after him because he betrayed him, and they're not happy with it. Of course, why would they? Why wouldn't they be? So, something that he's gonna have to deal with. The committee also kind of become returning villains. You get a little bit more backstory on him. Learn that he was a boxer in a past life, or not a past life, but before becoming a mercenary. And he beats up the committee, and that's the end of it. Let's see here. Some things you can't fight. Looks like we got a supernatural story here. He does go into that quite a bit sometimes, where he's just like ghosts or things along those matters, which is cool. I like having a supernatural hero where he can do some things that other heroes can't. Let's see. But yeah, I mean, early stories of Moon Knight, they're really fun. They're not, I wouldn't sit here and say like, oh man, these things are the greatest comic books ever. But they're definitely entertaining to get a feel of who Moon Knight is. Let's see, it looks like Marlene gets hurt again. And the people that he was fighting are kind of driving him mad, which is fun, those fun kind of stories. And this is like the first time you really see, I know there's awkward silence there. This is the first time you kind of see where Moon Knight is not as stable as he seemed originally. And then here comes the Midnight again. So he's returned. This is an important comic as well, because we see, like, the first time he returns. Just kind of through it. We get Frenchy stories and stuff. And it turns out that while he was in the water, he got raw sewage poured onto him, and then that's kind of deformed his face. And he's smashed the statue of Khonshu. So Moon Knight doesn't know if that's going to affect his abilities or not, because he doesn't know. It's entertaining because he doesn't know what his limitations are, because he hasn't explored it himself. Although it could be just because the writers haven't explored it, but, whatever. And then we have Bushman return. So Bushman's behind everything. So, yeah, like, this is a cool shot here. You got the smashed statue of Khonshu. Moon Knight's fighting Midnight, and Bushman's coming up from behind. It's kind of fun. Just how these guys are all dueling it out. Let's see here. I don't remember when, but eventually you find out that Frenchie, I don't think it's in this one, but I'll just mention it now. But Frenchie went to the committee. Maybe it was back in that committee issue. But Frenchie went to committee, and he's the one that supplied the committee with Moon Knight's name and said, like, hey, you should hire Moon Knight to fight the werewolf. And then Frenchie gave them the costume and said, like, hey, I want this guy to wear this. And so they're like, oh, okay. So that's how Moon Knight gets involved, because he was trying to investigate the committee. Now, it's funny how they just kind of like retcon that. It's kind of patchy at best, but yeah. So he defeats Bushman, of course. Midnight is supposedly dead again. And this goes into like the specs. There's the Mooncopter, or one of the Mooncopters. There's the mansion. There's some cover arts. So yeah. So that's Essential Moon Knight number 1, volume 1. It's very important for the character. I do recommend it. If you're looking into getting into Moon Knight, this is where you want to start. It's easy to get into the newer stories, because they're far more entertaining, and they're more of the Moon Knight that I'm familiar with of today. But this is where you need to start, because this gives you what you need to know about Moon Knight's character. There is a series of Moon Knight that there's a couple series actually where you can almost skip it. There's some important aspects in these stories, but not enough to make it like, oh man, you have to read this. This is one where you should read this. I'm not saying you have to. A have to point is volume 4, and we will get there. That is where you have to read. I really hope that's where they do if they do a show or a movie, I hope it's volume 4 area. This is entertaining. It's a fun read, but it's not a must read. It's a should read, but I wouldn't say must. I recommend it. It's kind of like I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Like if this was it for Moon Knight, it would be a very forgetful character. But because where it leads to makes it more important. I remember when Volume 4 came out, it made Werewolf by Night, number 32, skyrocket in price. And that's where I started reading, was when Volume 4 first started coming out. I read an article about it, and how people were really excited for it. I'm like, you know what? I need to try a new comic. I'm tired of reading, Spider-Man versus Green Goblin or Batman versus Joker. I want to read something new that I haven't read before. And I got into Volume 4, and it's been great ever since. So, there's nothing in here that's like, oh my god, this is the greatest story ever. There's some good stories in here, but it's not. I'm not gonna sit here and say it's the be-all, end-all. I kind of breezed over the most important stuff that are in here. So yeah, it's a good book. The title is very correct, Essentials, because this is compiling all of these stories. Like if you were to get into Moon Knight, not knowing that a huge chunk of his stories, like first half of his stories are not in Moon Knight comics. They're in Hulk magazines and spotlights and stuff. So you would never know the story of Moon Knight without all of those. So it's like, again, all of this is, like I said, is kind of filler, but still, you wouldn't know anything if you just jump right into number 1. You should really go here and read this and then this. But we'll kind of go from there. I got 2 more essentials to go through, and then yeah, we'll go through that.